Whew. Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome to a jam-packed edition of Canucks Conversation. Not quite an emergency episode. We said no emergency episode for Tyler Myers, but Harman, at the start of this week, you and I said, you know what? We're going to do two shows. Our third show will be a Saturday show with Dave Hall. By my count, this is our fifth show. We're going to have 6 shows this week, by my count.
It's pretty wild, but at the same time, it's fun because we're reacting to news or actual things to talk about. The only scenario where it would be annoying to do these many shows is if it was late November and we're talking about a Canucks team that back in 2020 or 2021 had fallen and completely stumbled out of the gate, and we have no fresh new topics to talk about. This is different. This is exciting. This is fun.
This is fun. This is exciting. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And that's the thing. Haven't eaten much. Haven't slept much. Yesterday was a big day. We could have done some emergency episodes. There's a ton of different news out there. So we're going to dive into it all today on this edition of Canucks Conversation, which is brought to you by our friends over at 4 Winds Brewing, more specifically by Huffed Gold. If you like the 4 Winds Light but are looking for something with a bit more weight behind it, you should check out the 4 Winds Huffed Gold Pilsner. Brewed as an homage to great German pils that came before it, Huffed Gold is crisp, clean, with a nice little European hop zip to round it all out. You can ask for Huffed Gold anywhere you find 4 Winds products, and it's also available online at 4windsbrewing.ca for delivery anywhere in BC. Locally owned and operated in Delta, British Columbia. We love working with 4 Winds Brewing. Harm, jam-packed show today. We're going to start with Quinn Hughes taking home the Norris Trophy. We've known this for a while. No real surprise there. We had the news article written what felt like for a couple months over at Canucks Army that Hughes was going to win the Norris. He takes home the Norris Trophy as the NHL's best defenseman. No real surprise there.
Yeah, what did surprise me, though, is how lopsided it was in Hughes' favor. Now, it should have been lopsided, but what I see right now is he got 172 first place votes. The next best was Roman Josi at 12, right? And I think that speaks to not only how well Hughes played and the importance of having the team success and narrative around the Canucks turnaround and him being the captain as a catalyst behind all of that, but also the power of Canucks Twitter, right? Since the start of the season, from Canucks fans dunking on Dom Luszczyszyn for having him in Tier 3B, all the way through the entire year, Canucks
to
fans,
Frank being on our show. Frank being on our show late in the year.
It was a relentless assault of, hey, this guy better win the Norris. This guy is way better than the rest of the league thinks. And I have no doubt that had a major impact in the voting.
Oh, absolutely. Look, we're not fans of bullying on this show. Let's make that clear. But sometimes I'm just joking, of course. But you're right. The pressure was there to get it right, and the voters did get it right. We didn't really talk. I guess we talked about Colin Campbell, because when you say voters getting it right, I immediately think of how awful the Hockey Hall of Fame voting process is. But I digress. We won't talk about it. We're gonna keep talking about Hughes and the Norris. The thing I really loved about it was the acceptance speech, Harm. At the end of it, he says, most importantly, after he had already said most importantly and thanked his family, he didn't just say, like, congrats to Roman and Cale on great seasons. He dove in and he gave reasons why those guys were good. And when I think Nashville Predators, I think of you, Roman, which that's a super nice thing to say. Then to Cale, he says, I love watching my brothers the most, but right behind them, it's probably you. Like, that was like the nicest acceptance speech I've ever heard. You know what it reminded me of? And you don't have a brother, right? You just have a sister?
Yeah, I don't have a brother.
Okay, I grew up with a brother. I grew up with an older brother. One brother. That's my only sibling. So what my mom used to make us do is when we were being mean to each other or we would get into a fight, she would stop everything and she'd say 3 nice things about your brother. As we got older, we got a little more clever and it started turning into you're not an idiot and all that sort of stuff. But it reminded me of that. Like, it reminded me of having to say 3 nice things about my brother. Like, it's like Quinn Hughes, as he was writing his acceptance speech, he's like, all right, I'm going to write down 3 nice things about Roman Josi, 3 nice things about Cale Makar. We used to call it the 3 nice things rule. And it seemed like Quinn Hughes has heard about it and adhered to it too. Who knows? He grew up with brothers. Maybe he's thinking the exact same thing that I'm thinking about when it comes to this. But yes, he wins by a landslide, and rightfully so. Adam Fox with 1 first place vote, which I noticed. And honestly, I'll quickly go through my ballot. I think that'd be a quick little fun thing to do. I'll go through my ballot. I think, did we already do it? I guess, no, we did last year's because we didn't want to. Okay, I'll read you my ballot. For Norris, I had Hughes, Josi, Hedman, Makar, Bouchard. I think I should have had Bouchard higher. I think in retrospect, I would put Evan Bouchard probably right behind Roman Josi. And I guess maybe part of that is bias of the playoffs because he was so good in the playoffs, but I also don't think I gave him enough credit for how good his regular season was. And like maybe I'm not wrong because he did have a tough start to the year, but by the end of it, he was, I think, a top 3 defenseman.
Yeah, I in retrospect too had him too low. I don't even know if I had him in my top 5. I think he might have been just behind Forsling maybe, but I weighed, I think, his first 6 weeks, first couple months too heavily in terms of the defensive struggles that he had, which were very real, but he more than made up for it with the rest of the body of his work through the regular season. I guess I also docked him points because I thought, well, Matthias Ekholm, at least in the regular season, was an almost equal play driver. So I thought, okay, other defensemen are clearly the anchor of, like, for example, and Adam Fox he's clearly the man on that pairing. It's Ryan Lindgren is not doing a lot of the heavy lifting. It's very much a complementary type partnership. Whereas with Bouchard, it felt like, okay, Ekholm is contributing a ton from a defensive standpoint and sort of being a defensive safety blanket. But I agree. I probably had Bouchard too low as well.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, you're not going to get it right. Tobias Bjornfot won the cup. Sometimes you do get it right, like I did with that Lady Bing vote. Okay, let's get to Myers re-signing and a little bit of news from Patrick Allvin's presser this morning. Nikita Zadorov is heading to free agency. One call can change everything, but it really does seem like Nikita Zadorov's time in Vancouver has come to an end as he is getting ready to test free agency. Harm, let's start on Myers because it's also the subject. Actually, let's start on Zadorov. Then we'll go to Myers. Poll question is about Tyler Myers as well, and Tyler Myers' new contract, which if you haven't heard already, is a 3x3 contract. Harman, I'll just be honest. This is higher than I think both of us were anticipating when we were doing our little cap-friendly lineups. I didn't see anybody, not one Canucks fan, that submitted a lineup during our Canucks cap-friendly episode had Myers on a 3x3. It's not an overpay. It's probably a fine deal, especially when you consider what he might have gotten on the free agent market. Like, look at what Luke Shen got just last year. Myers would have gotten paid that, if not more. I just thought it would be a little bit lower, maybe one less year for a guy who it sounded like was ready to take a hometown discount.
Yeah, it's the third year that is a little bit concerning to me. I don't have any problems with the $3 million cap hit, but I would have loved this deal a lot more if it was $3 million times 2 years. The third year scares me a little bit. And look, a lot of times when you sign free agent contracts, the last year or two, or if it's a 7-year deal, maybe 3 years, the back end of contract, it's normal to have reservations and concerns about that. But the reason it's a bit more pressing in this instance is because year 3 of Myers' deal is also the final year of Quinn Hughes' contract when he's under an $8 million cap hit. So that's a massive year in terms of the Canucks wanting to contend for a Stanley Cup. And I worry about how Myers at age 36 or 37 is going to look in the final year of that deal. But I'm assuming the Canucks look at the success that he had under Rick Tocchet, especially in the second half of the season onward, and believe that they have the environment and infrastructure for him to age gracefully. We'll see, but put it this way, if it was going to be 3 years, I would have liked to see the cap hit below 3. It wasn't, and so yeah, this did clock in a little bit more expensive than I would have liked to see it.
Let's see what the folks thought. Let's see what the people thought. Let's get to our poll question, which is about this contract, and it is our poll question, and it is brought to you by Bet365. And folks, we're simply asking you, what did you think of the 3x3 contract that Tyler Myers got? Right now, 44% of people say they like it, 34.8% say meh, 12.9% say they are not happy with it, and the smallest vote, 8.3%, say they love it. So majority, it's like, okay, I like it, and meh. That's where it is right now for Canucks fans, and I don't think they're wrong in that estimation.
Yeah, for me, it's somewhere between, like, meh sounds a little bit, I don't want to say insulting, but it sounds quite negative. But I'm not going to say I like it. It's kind of like that's okay. I have some question marks, but we'll see type of sentiment for me.
And that was our poll question, and it was brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code VANBONUS when you sign up for an account. Okay, Harm, let's go to Nikita Zadorov now. Patrick Allvin spoke this morning, and he shared that Nikita Zadorov is heading to free agency. The Canucks will not be re-signing Nikita Zadorov. All indications.
Yeah, I'm on board with this. I think this is a savvy decision by the Canucks to recognize that, hey, Zadorov, yes, in a perfect world, is a player that we wanted to bring back, but ultimately his price tag is too expensive for what else the Canucks want to do with their roster. As you're sort of building a contender, you don't want to be in the business of overpaying guys, because that creates problems down the road, especially now that Pettersson has his new deal kicking in at 11.6. Hronik's raise. Maybe after this season, you might end up giving Brock Besser a raise on his extension. You're getting to the point where a lot of Vancouver's best players are already being paid market value, meaning you can't afford to then, with the players in the middle or the bottom end of your lineup, pay a premium. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to field a strong enough supporting cast. So you have to make tough decisions. And credit to Patrick Allvin for being able to draw a line in the sand and say, you know what, if your numbers, I mean, I don't know what the exact number is, but if it was north of $5 million on a long-term deal, well, then we can't do that for a player that's really good, but ultimately is somewhere in the neighborhood of a number 4 or 5 defenseman.
Yeah, and Allvin said, I can't overpay one single player. Nikita Zadorov was extremely good for us in the playoffs and a character guy, and we did our best, and he decided he wanted to go somewhere else. I think, look, I like Nikita Zadorov a lot, and I'm not going to do the thing where, as soon as he's gone, I don't like him. That's absolutely not what I'm trying to do, but I do think there was a strong recency bias with Zadorov and the playoff performance. And I mean, I said that before, when I still thought they were going to sign him as well, right? Like this isn't just a take I'm throwing out there now that he's not going to end up being a Canuck, but it just feels like there was a lot of recency bias and that people kind of forgot how he played for a majority of his time as a Canuck. And that was as a 4 or 5 or even 4 or 5 defenseman.
Yeah, definitely. It was the playoffs where things absolutely ramped up. And you also have to keep in mind players in a contract year, when they know that they have all the spotlight on them in the playoffs. And if I have a good run, this could be a life-changing contract for me. There's always extra motivation. There's always an extra sort of incentive or a push or a boost you get. There are countless examples of players that have a really strong contract year, get paid, and they're not quite what they were in their contract year. And in Zadorov's case, it would have been, okay, if you believe he's what he showed in the playoffs all the time, then okay, that's a top 4 defenseman. But that's a small, 16 game sample, as opposed to the hundreds of NHL games that he's played where he hasn't consistently maintained that type of level.
Hey, if we're gonna say about Zadorov, got to see some recency bias with Tyler Myers as well. But again, it's a full season of Myers, and I just don't know, because we're gonna get to it anyone else. The other targets that we're hearing connected to the Canucks. We're kind of racing through this show, so let me make sure I haven't missed any ad reads. Oh, here's one. There's one. Okay, let's get to anyone else. But before that, I'm going to tell you quickly about the Daily Faceoff Live Free Agency Special coming to you on July 1st. There it is, 2024. Man, this read sucks. Okay, live from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern. Join Tyler Remchuk, NHL insider Frank Saravelli, former NHLers Carter Hutton and Colby Cohen, and our friends from all over the league for 3 hours of nonstop action as they dive deep into the madness of free agency. We'll be breaking down every trade, discussing the impact on teams, predicting the future of the free agents, and giving you the inside scoop on all the wheeling and dealing happening around the league. Catch all the action live on July 1st from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern on the Daily Faceoff Live Free Agency Special that you won't want to miss. And of course, we will also be live on July 1st, shortly after July 1st. It's going to be a fun show. We're going to have a lot of different guests. I'm planning a big show. Jacob Lazar is going to be producing that one, and we're going to be just wheeling and dealing all day long. We're going to have a cycle of people coming through. It's going to be a wild show. But yeah, this is today's show, and tomorrow's show is going to be the recap of the draft, because Harm, we haven't even touched on it. the draft starts tonight, and that's where we're expecting to see some movement. So with that, let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. The Seas are back at the Nat for 9 in a row. Fireworks are back, or they were back Thursday night. School's out. Check out the Nooner at the Nat on Friday the 28th, today, and a special Canada Day Nooner on Monday, July 1st. Catch fireworks, giveaways, Friday Nooners, and Superstar appearances all summer long. To get your tickets, call 604-872-5232 or go to canadiansbaseball.com. Okay. We had a big Zadorov guy in the chat. Some people are very sad to see Zadorov go, but ultimately, I think when you see what he signs for in free agency, you'll probably have the feeling of, okay, no wonder the Canucks couldn't have matched that. Although, if people say, well, if they had money for Tyler Myers and they had money for Dakota Joshua, I would have rather they overpay a little bit for Nikita Zadorov. And I'm not saying Joshua is an overpay, maybe Myers a little bit, if that's your take. I'll listen to that. But I think when you see it signed on July 1, what Zadorov signs for, hell, maybe he doesn't sign on July 1. When you see what Zadorov signs for, I think Canucks fans are going to have that moment of, okay, they probably couldn't have matched this. It's going to be the opposite of what it was when Toffoli signed with the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, especially because as we get to some of these other D targets, you can probably find a player in and around the same salary range that is a more proven top four defender that has a longer track record and is potentially, I shouldn't say potentially, probably an upgrade on what Zadorov can give you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of options out there, one of which looks like John Marino. We saw it from Frank Saravalli today, reporting that the Devils are trying to move John Marino, and obviously we've heard about the Brett Pesce aspect of all of this as well. So with Zadorov gone, could the Canucks be interested in John Marino? They were in the mix before, like they were in the mix in 2022 before he was traded to the Devils. And just as a reminder for people, he was traded for Ty Smith and a 3rd round pick. So it wasn't a crazy haul or anything like that. He signed for 3 more seasons. That includes this upcoming season at $4.4 million. And Harm, the thing you were saying pre-show that we both kind of forgot about, Jim Rutherford loves this guy.
Yeah, and so I remember when we first talked about Marino and anyone else maybe 2-3 days ago, my take was I really like the player, but I don't know if the Canucks will look at him as a good stylistic fit because he's not physical / hard to play against, and he's coming off a tough year defensively. And what I totally forgot is that Jim Rutherford is a huge John Marino fan, which is going to, of course, influence how front office believes. Rutherford extended Marino to the contract he's currently on, which was initially a 6-year deal, as one of the last things he did before resigning as Penguins general manager. You also have to remember the timing. Marino still had a full year left on his ELC. So there was no rush to have to sign him to a long-term deal. Plus, he'd only just come off his rookie season, which was the abbreviated 56-game season. So Jim Rutherford, after less than 60 games of watching John Marino play, was such a fan that he was willing to hand him a 6-year extension. That tells you right there how highly he thought of the player back then. And I also figure that the Canucks look themselves as a team with the coaching structure and environment to get the best out of not just Marino, but defensemen as a whole. And this is where I think just philosophically, environment matters a ton for defensemen. You look at the Florida Panthers, every defenseman that they touch turns into gold, right? Forsling off waivers turns into a number 1 D. Montour, it wasn't just that he struggled initially in Anaheim, but Buffalo first acquired him as a reclamation project, didn't work out there. It was then in Florida where he really figured things out and became a borderline top pair caliber contributor. Nico Mikkola this past year, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And you even think about, to a lesser extent, what happened with the Canucks this year, right? They signed Carson Soucy. He'd never been an effective top 4 defenseman before. He'd more so been a great 3rd pair guy. He arguably has the best season of his career. Tyler Myers really improves under this coaching staff. Noah Juleson develops into a reliable number 7 defenseman. So they probably feel like they can unlock the peak version of John Marino, and the peak version of John Marino can be a really good number 3 defenseman.
I like it. We were talking about this before. You don't think the Canucks are looking at it and saying, Who is his coach? Oh, Travis Green. Yeah, we think he'll improve away from Travis Green. No disrespect to Travis Green. Obviously, it's a joke, but you do have to think that they would assume that they could get more of John Marino in this defensive environment than what they had in New Jersey. And not to mention, Harm, like, let's not forget what a season it was for New Jersey. All the injuries, key players, Dougie Hamilton, Jack Hughes, like, they were in a tough metropolitan division. You're not going to do anything when that's what you have. And obviously the goaltending has been a problem for them for some time now, and it definitely was last year. They go out and address it by trading for Jacob Markstrom. But again, if you're wondering why John Marino might be available, the reports are that Brett Pesce is going to sign with the Devils on July 1. So it'll be interesting to see which route they go. We could see Marino move. Hell, we could be doing an emergency episode in 2 hours about a Marino trade to the Canucks. Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah, and just to add as well, one of the big differences this year for Marino and why he struggled a bit was Ryan Graves left him for agency, right? And Graves and Marino were a really good partnership, and that's another way you can talk yourself into believing that Marino could be a fit is you look at Graves as this big, not just big, like massive, like 6'5" lefty that plays a simple stay-at-home style. Well, the Canucks have a big, relatively simple stay-at-home 6'5", 6'6" left shot defenseman in Carson Soucy, and Soucy's arguably, at least based off this past season, better than Ryan Graves, who really struggled in Pittsburgh. So that's another potential reason for why they may think it's a fit. Now, the bear case would be statistically this year, he was poor at defending passes into slot. And so you know that the Soucy pair is going to get tough matchups. So are you confident that Marino is going to defend well enough? But the flip side of the coin, the bull case also is the Soucy pair could have really used a better puck mover. And I think we saw this in the playoffs where Soucy and Myers, they defended well in zone, but it was a lot of bend but don't break. They were stuck in their own zone for way too many shifts. And the Canucks in the playoffs, they averaged somewhere in the neighborhood of like 14 shots per hour when Quinn Hughes was on the bench. The Canucks just couldn't really get out of their own zone. They couldn't generate any offense. And when we talk about upgrading this team's offensive punch, it's not just acquire a top six forward. It's can they get more out of the blue line in terms of transitioning it better, doing a better job of beating the heavy forecheck pressure of opposing teams. And this is where maybe Marino can be the puck mover that gives your second pair a totally different gear.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like the fit a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, when you brought up the Soucy Marino thing, and we have people in the chat as well talking about a Soucy Marino pairing, it feels like, especially at 4.4 million, like, it feels like that would be one of the best upgrades you could find. Like, what would John Marino get right now if he was in free agency, right? Like, I don't think it would be much more than what you would have him for, which is 3 years at 4.4 million. And again, let's not forget, he was moved for just a third and Ty Smith, and I'd say his value was higher back then, more years on the contract, but my point is that it's not going to cost you a ton to go get him in a trade, you wouldn't think.
Yeah, it's especially, again, because of the year that he's coming off of, but we'll see. A team like Ottawa, I'm sure, is scouring the market for right shot top for defenseman. Buffalo, there will be a number of teams sort of interested, but yeah, I don't expect the asking price to be too high. And put it this way, if the Canucks have the confidence that with this coaching, with this environment, that they can help stabilize Marino's play defensively, then again, a year ago, he was not just playing well in a second pair role, but driving high end two-way results in a second pair role. And at that point, his defensive numbers were pretty strong too. So we'll see how the Canucks feel about this and just how confident they are that they can help him turn things around after this past year.
Okay, a few things going on around the league right now. Travis Wall brought up Gensel re-signing in Carolina. We've heard some rumors. We've heard the insiders throwing it out that the Hurricanes are making a strong push to re-sign Jake Gensel. So that's all the info there. We don't need to, we're going to dive into the plan B and stuff because that's a lot of the questions that we're having right now. But I'll ask you this one, Harm. In terms of your next up winger, if Gensel is going to sign in Carolina, Stamkos goes to Toronto, and Reinhart goes to Florida, who is your next best preference winger? Does a guy like Marchessault interest you?
Yeah, he 100% would be interesting. He's coming off a 42 goal campaign, and Vegas is in a bind. I am so fascinated to see what the Golden Knights are going to do, because as it stands right now, they can't really afford to re-sign Marchessault. So are they going to move a player like Zach Whitecloud to open up a little bit of cap space? That's definitely a maneuver they could pull off to then be able to afford a Marchessault extension. Are they going to, like, Shea Theodore is a name that's come up a lot among Vegas fans, because Theodore is only a year away from being an unrestricted free agent. He's on a bargain of a $5.2 million AAV right now. Plus, they just acquired Noah Hannafin and extended him to a long-term deal. So when you're already paying Pietrangelo a ton, a lot of Vegas fans have been wondering, okay, can we afford to keep Theodore past the season? And if you can't, then you may as well cash him in as a trade chip and get a haul for him now. And so does that create an avenue to help you manufacture room for Marchessault? But yeah, if Marchessault hits the market, he'd be intriguing. You're, of course, going to look at Tyler Toffoli as an option, Chandler Stevenson, Jake DeBrusk. The only issue I see with some of these names after you get past Marchessault is, yes, those players may be a fit with Pedersen, and yeah, they check the top 6 box. But if you made a concerted effort to carve out the salary cap space, man, I'd really love to see them find more of an elite difference maker. And maybe that means looking at the trade market, and yeah, you don't like paying assets as opposed to free agent, doesn't cost you anything besides the contract. But players like Ehlers and Natchez and Buchnevich, they would pack way more of a punch at the top of your lineup than, say, a Toffoli or a Jake DeBrusk or some of those second-tier options. I got to be honest, I don't love a lot of the second-tier winger options, because even Toffoli, like, part of the reason that he didn't re-sign in New Jersey prior to the deadline was because he was asking for a lot of term. And Toffoli isn't exactly young. He's 32 years old. So I like that. That to me is like, I don't think there's a really obvious, like, oh man, this plan B would be an absolute home run. And that's part of what I'm so interested to see, if the Canucks can find a way to think outside of the box around, is how creative can they get here?
Okay. Nar's asking for predictions on what he says Toronto, but whoever. Zadorov's next contract. What's his next contract look like? AAV. I'll tell you. I'll bet you anything. I actually won't bet anything. I'm just gonna stick with my guns because I put it in my predictions piece. Zadorov at $6 million. I bet that's his AAV. And I'd argue.
Really? You think so?
I'd argue he might get the Jim Benning special. The first contract Tyler Myers signed. He might get the 5x6.
Oh man, that would be a doozy.
For living. Jim Benning with better PR.
That would be a disaster of a contract if you sign $6 million times 5 years. Jeez.
Well, okay. Here's my thought process, though, Harm. I'm trying to think, and I don't have any inside knowledge. I'm not spouting numbers because I know and I've talked to the negotiating parties or anything. But I'm just trying to think. Okay, Zadorov clearly wanted to stay in Vancouver. He likes the city. He wanted long term. Wanted to be here. We talked to Dan Murphy about all this last week as well. If you didn't see that show, go check it out. I'm just trying to think, okay, what were the Canucks at, and what would be the point where Zadorov would say, okay, no, I know I can get this on the open market, so I have to do that. Do you think Zadorov would leave over like $1 million? Because if the Canucks were at 4.5 or 5 million, which I think would probably be the range they're in, maybe they were at 4. I don't know. But I'm thinking they were probably at 4.5, 5 million. If Zadorov knows he can get 5.5 million or 6 million on the open market, I think that's the time that he would leave the Canucks. So I don't think it's going to be under 5.5 personally.
Yeah, my initial thought, again, without any background, talking to his camp or anything, is a cap hit that starts with a 5. Can he get to 6? I'm a little bit less confident about that, but you also have to remember sometimes players overestimate their market. Yeah, Frank brought up the example of Evander Kane. We can always think back to John Klingberg a couple of years ago when he initially turned down a huge extension offer from the Dallas Stars and had to settle for a 1-year, $7 million deal with the Ducks. Again, I'm not saying that Zadorov is going to overestimate his market to that degree, but the point is, it's just because he walked from the Canucks despite a pretty strong offer by the team, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to get all the way to 6.
Yeah. John Klingberg, I'm just kind of looking back at it through his years. That's a huge mistake. Like, he fired his agent, right?
I believe he switched agents. Yeah.
No, fired his agent. You don't need to say switched. He fired his agent, and rightfully so. That guy, so he had an 8-year deal on the table, and he's now had to sign a bunch of 1-year deals. What is John Klingberg going to get in free
I don't think he's
agency?
playing hockey again.
Is he done?
This is what happened to the Leafs, right? He was awful out of the gate. And then a couple months into the season, they put him on Robida Island, LTIR.
Yes.
So I don't think he's going to play again.
That is, I don't think you can sue your agent, but owner quads would be trying to sue the agent after that. That is actually that is unbelievable. And I'm not, look, estimated career earnings, $38 million. It's not, don't need to cry for him, but holy cow. When you think of how much money that dude had to leave on the table.
How much was he offered? Now I actually want to.
Yeah, go find that deal, because I think it was like 8 years and it was over $6 million per year.
And how different would the Stars look right now? They would have no shot at keeping Tanev.
Oh yeah. So he kind of did them a favor, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah,
I feel bad for John Klingberg, though. I feel really bad for John Klingberg. Obviously the injury as well, but that signs the 1-year deal in Anaheim for $7 million. Then he gets 4.15 from the Leafs, and now he might never play again. He was 2 years ago. He was offered.
So yeah, Jeff Merrick reported that on 32 Thoughts a couple of years ago that the Stars had offered Klingberg a deal in the neighborhood of 8 years at $7.25 million per season. Klingberg's camp rejected it and wanted 8 times 8.
There's a lesson in there, folks. There's a lesson in there. I'll bet you John Klingberg doesn't say 3 nice things about that agent at any point for the rest of his life.
Well, I mean, it can't just blame the agent.
Yeah, you can.
No, excuse me. Dude.
Yeah, you can.
Agents are going to do what are going to steer a player in the direction that the client wants them to go in. It's ultimately the player's decision. If an agent comes to me with 7.25 million times 8, now yes, I can be upset if my agent is saying, well, we think you might be able to get more elsewhere or keep pushing.
You think John Klingberg's making calls and figuring out what other teams are gonna? No, John Klingberg doesn't know what he's getting.
That's mid-season. But that was mid-season. That wasn't right before July 1st.
I mean,
especially in a state, especially in a place with no state income tax. Like, put it this way. An agent isn't going to go to the player and be like, don't sign this contract. Whatever you do, don't sign this contract. He's going to be like, hey, this is what they've presented. I think you might be able to squeeze out a little bit more July 1st, but ultimately it's up to you. What do you think? So Klingberg can't just, it's on both of them. It's the agent and the player. You can't just fully dump all of it on the agent.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Maybe it's not all on the agent.
And you have to remember, the agent earns a commission on the contract that's signed. So don't you think even the agent, maybe he would have been holding out hope for getting a little bit more on July 1st, but it's not like the agent would have been, put it this way, if Klingberg wanted to sign that deal, the agent isn't going to turn away from a guaranteed massive commission.
What's the agent? Who is the agent? I need to find it. Peter Wallen.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Peter Wallen. Okay, now we got to go look at what Peter Wallen's got in the back pocket. Okay, who does he have as clients? Whoa. Okay, he's got $58 million on the Colorado Avalanche through 2 contracts. So I'm gonna guess he's Nate McKinnon's agent. Okay, he's got Elias Lindholm, Victor Hedman, Gabriel Landeskog, Jonas Brodin, Marcus Pettersson. Who does he have on the Avs? Okay, anyways, I'm not gonna keep.
It says Landeskog.
Maybe, but
it says Landeskog.
Where are you looking?
Puckpedia.
I'm also looking at Puckpedia. What the hell am I? What am I missing?
I don't know. I see it under active contracts.
I see only Elias Lindholm under active contracts. Lindholm.
That's expired. That's under expired contracts.
There it is. All right, Canucks conversation, folks. Yeah, anything can happen. Okay, let's quickly wrap up here. We got a few other questions. I'm just trying to see if there's any ones that we really want to get to. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, let's just wrap it up. Let's just wrap up. We'll get to the Bet365 bet of the day. Actually, we'll close on this because you brought them up. What would you pay for an Ehlers, Buchnevich, Natchez type on the trade market?
Okay, so Natchez
Are you moving more
is different.
picks?
Sorry?
Are you moving more picks?
Yeah, I'm 100%. Like, you have to include your 2025 first. Now, part of it comes down to how confident am I about the extension, and because if it's just 1 year of Buchnevich or Ehlers, then I'm not going to pay as much, right? So that's where it sort of hinges on, is Winnipeg going to give me permission to talk to the agent, work out an extension beforehand? And do I like that number? Like, what's the number? Same thing with Buchnevich. Now, somewhere with Buchnevich, like, honestly, first round pick, and you maybe even think about as much as I wouldn't want to, you're going to have to think about another blue chip piece, whether it's a Höglander, whether it's, I don't think you want to do Lekkerimaki because I think he's close to being an impact player, but like, you might have to think about a Willander. And again, that depends, that you'd have to be confident about the contract number, right? That's where you don't love to necessarily give that much up. But again, you think about like a Buchnevich, he's a point per game winger who is also a defensive stud and kills penalties, and in a pinch can also has the versatility to play center like he did this past year. Would be the dream fit with Buchnevich. Whereas Willander, like, he may not be a top 4 defender by the time Quinn Hughes' 3-year deal expires, which is your window to win a cup. Whereas Lekkerimaki, you can see him within that 3-year window becoming an impact player. And Willander, like, it takes a while for these young defensemen to develop. So, and he wasn't even close to being ready to turn pro for this coming season. So, like, by next season, he may not be NHL ready. And so by the end of Hughes' contract, he may be a player that is in your lineup, but is he a top 4 guy? And you have to make that decision because
what's your window?
Decide
what your window
right?
is. Decide what your
So
window is.
again, tons of variables because extensions are involved, and I'd have to think really deep about giving up a blue chip piece. Maybe it's not worth it relative to what else might be out there on the free agent market. But the point being is, if I can land like an actual star, like, that's what might put you over the top in becoming a Stanley Cup contender. Because right now, I think the Canucks are on the fringes, right? They're a very good team. They're a playoff team. They're a team that can win around. But if you want to be one of the top handful of teams, I think you need a star. And so as much as I would hate giving up a big package, if I can get a star, and I believe this is the guy that's going to put me over the top, why would you not do it if it amplifies your chances of legitimately contending for a cup?
Absolutely agree with you. Okay, let's close it out. Let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, which is brought to you by, you guessed it, Bet365. Folks, we are taking the Yankees to snap their losing streak, get back to their winning ways with Marcus Stroman on the bump, minus 115 odds for the Yankees to beat the Toronto Blue Jays, minus 115 on the money line over at Bet365. Must be 90 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. We'll wrap it up there. I will see you tomorrow with Dave Hall joining me for a special draft edition of, we didn't even talk about the draft. We'll see if a trade happens, folks. Nothing else is going to happen with the Canucks tonight unless it's a trade. So no need to talk about the draft. We'll be back tomorrow to recap what the Canucks do at the draft. And of course, we have all the coverage over at CanucksArmy.com as well. Who the Canucks could pick with each pick. Dave had a series, so go check that out over at CanucksArmy.com. But we will close it out there. For my co-host Harmon Dial and our technical producer Grady Sass, my name is Dave Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to the episode of the Canucks Conversation.